The New York Times put out an obituary on Mike that had more focus on the fact that he wept versus what was in the papers. And this is mainstream media that's focused not on the content of the papers, but in the way it was presented, which I'm thinking, that's not journalism from anything that I can see. And the obituary writer had been deceased for 2 years. He's so I don't know what what they've got. The New York Times maybe, and I'm sad that they don't have enough staff.
Mike Gravel, unconventional 2-term Alaska senator, dies at 91. Okay, just remember what not only obviously what Lynne has been saying to us, but also Daniel Ellsberg, who in theory the New York Times, the New York Times respects, but we know not really. So this is how they describe this person who Daniel Ellsberg was just praising. He made headlines by fighting for an oil pipeline. By the way, totally intentionally saying that in a way that makes it seem like he was bad on the environment.
Right, and not about the Native Americans, not what he did for the Native Americans and that they could have the resources of their land.
Yeah, ridiculous. He made headlines for fighting for an oil pipeline and reading the Pentagon Papers aloud. After 25 years of obscurity, he reemerged with a quixotic presidential campaign. I mean, you could also say he reemerged with a presidential campaign that pushed certain issues into the political discourse. I mean, there's so many other ways you could put it out there. Mm-hmm. But again, they said this stuff. If they're going to say this stuff about Bernie Sanders, who did pretty well, obviously they're going to say this about someone who was not as did not make as much of an impact numbers wise. But again, in neither case should it be phrased that way. But they can't focus on the issues. So everything's about the personality. As you said, Mike Gravel, a 2-term Democrat senator from Alaska who played a central role in the 1970s legislation to build the Trans-Alaska oil pipeline, but who was perhaps better known as an unabashed attention getter.
Yeah.
In one case, reading the Pentagon Papers aloud at a hearing at a time when newspapers were barred from publishing them and later mounting long-shot presidential runs. Died on Saturday at his home in Seaside, California. He was 91. Yeah.
Can I pause you right there, Katie?
Of course,
because this unabashed attention getter, in a case when when the papers were barred from publishing, the reason the papers were barred from publishing is because the Nixon administration was trying to shut them down. The Supreme Court case that came one day after my dad read the papers into the public record was decided, I believe there were 9 justices, 6-3, that the Post could continue to, and the other newspapers could continue to publish these small excerpts. But in the opinions of the justices, it shows how razor thin this could have gone easily the other way. They didn't want to make this in favor of the Post, but they had to because the papers were already out in the public record. So there would have been a reckoning back on the Supreme Court if they had said the Post shouldn't, the Post and the other papers can't do it. So the inaccuracies of this are astounding. The paper was barred from publishing. The Washington Post wouldn't exist today, in my opinion, if it weren't for Mike Gravel putting it into the public record, giving those 9 justices something to really think about when they had to make their decision the next day, whether the Post should be able to continue to print or not. So, this wasn't like that Mike was grandstanding, so that the papers, he could get out there before the Post and the Times. He was trying to ensure that the Post and the Times would continue to publish. And to take that just one step further, if I might, the Post and the Publish only published a small portion of the papers. Mike wanted the full set that Dan gave him originally to be published, so that the people could read all the context around this. And again, the Post didn't do it. The New York Times didn't do it. He had to go all the way. He tried all kinds of different publishers. Nobody would touch it. Beacon Press from the Unitarian Church took it on, and then they got harassed and nearly bankrupted by the Nixon administration. And then there was the Supreme Court case where Mike got that legal precedent that he was just he was correct in releasing the papers the way he did. So, I mean, this guy Yeah.
I mean, this is something, the Pentagon Papers, there are a lot of causes, like free speech causes, civil liberties causes, like, anti-military industrial complex causes that I think are totally just, obviously, that everyone watching my show thinks that is true of, but like, doesn't have mainstream acceptance. Like the Pentagon Papers, libs, mainstream people claim to think that that was a good thing, right? People love, and Ellsberg himself on an episode of Useful Idiots had made this really interesting point about how he's very aware of when he gets played by people who are like, well, Ellsberg was good, but Snowden and Manning and Assange are bad. He's like, there's really no difference. If one thing was good, if I'm a hero, then other people should be also. So
Right.
the fact that the New York Times actually thinks that they can, like, I mean, in a way, shout out to them for being so unaware and so self-incriminating that they didn't, because if they just said he was attention getting, they could have put something else in there that was like, would make it seem like they had more ground to stand on. They could have done something a little bit more just like flamboyant that he did, because people do things that are on a scale of flamboyance that are more fun. But this is so incredibly substantive. Like, how do you pretend that this is attention getting? It's literally raising alarm. It's sounding, I mean, it's like Paul Revere, that's not to romanticize, U.S. history, but like Paul Revere, that attention getting, horseback rider who wouldn't shut up. He just loved getting attention and looking for validation. Like, this was the very important thing that he did, like this is stuff like what, I mean, they cut your dad out of that movie. What was it? The Post?
Yeah, I know.
Like, these things are supposed to be good. These things are what like American democracy, porn are based on. So
Right.
sorry, I just get so angry because
No, I hear you. And The Most Dangerous Man in America is far better. The
right.
Post is
Yes.
very important, but again, Jeff Bezos owns the Post, so the Post has to be the star of the show, and nobody
Right.
else can be the star. Evidently, I don't know.
Yeah.
Even Ellsberg was so downplayed in the Post.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. So here's some more ridiculous stuff. He was a quirky fixture in several early debates in 2007, calling for a constitutional amendment to allow citizens to enact laws by referendums. Like, that's not that weird.
Yeah.
He nonetheless persisted, showing, but when the voting began in 2008, he never got 1% of the total. And in primary, wow, I can't believe that, given how fair and balanced the media's representation.
And they
of him
X'd him out, and then Kucinich was right after him.
Yeah, right.
Just chop, chop, chop.
Yeah. He nonetheless persisted, showing the same commitment to going it alone that he had displayed by nominating himself for vice president in 1972, staging one-man filibusters, and reading the Pentagon Papers aloud. Again, that weird, quirky thing. Efforts that even senators who agreed with him regarded as grandstanding. Really?
Again, and where were those senators like Fulbright and others that Dan mentioned at the beginning, McGovern, so McGovern and all these others get a fabulous eulogy, and Mike gets this. I mean, wow.
Really disgusting.
Yeah. Yeah, he doesn't get into the pipeline of like what the pipeline did for Alaska. And back then, it was an oil embargo and the destabilization of the U.S. economy. It was serious. You're too young to remember the 70s, but
wasn't born yet.
I remember there's gas lines and, out of control inflation, and inflation that was brought on by an energy shock. So, people losing their jobs, recession, stagflation,
right.
It was bad. And so the climate for finding some energy source and what we knew at the time, the pipeline made sense. And, today, before, when solar and wind started becoming more available or thought about and studied, he was right there with the Aleutian, the Aleutian chain harness the wind of the Aleutian chain. So yeah, no, it's a shame. And I just wanted to, my daughter pointed this out, which is at the end, you'll see that the author of this obituary actually is deceased. He died 2 years ago. So the New York Times lack of respect for my father is so unbelievable that they took this from somebody who's already deceased. Adam Clymer called me to fact check that, yes, my dad died. And that was about it. Oh, I'm sorry. Adam Clymer is the reporter that died.
Right.
And then Hayden was the one who called me.
Oh, okay. I was like,
verify.
from the dead, Adam
Yeah.
Clymer. Okay, yeah.
Thank you for helping me on that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, maybe you want to like get someone, you want to ask someone who's alive to write.
And has any political sense whatsoever. So I'm afraid, Jack and William know nothing about politics or history, or I know that they are underpaid and overworked, but it's just a sad thing that the New York Times. Now there's another reporter that did a great article. Reporter at the Times. Her name is Jamie, and I'm going to find her last name. I wish they had Googled her article on Mike. Her name is Jamie, Jamie, last name Keiles, Keelis, Jamie Keelis, and her article about Mike and the teens was in the New York Times Magazine, and it's excellent. I highly recommend people read that. She did an awesome job. I mean, he came out to Seaside and interviewed my dad and spent the whole day with us. It was beautiful. And she did a great article really covering what direct democracy is. Obviously this guy didn't, even bother to look at his own publication.
I'm just tweeting at the New York Times. I'm thanking them for sorry, I don't mean to laugh. It's like infuriating.
No, it's just such a poor piece of, it's not even journalism as far as I can tell. They pulled something out of the can 2 years ago by somebody who didn't know anything, didn't like Mike, didn't do
just get someone to plagiarize it. You know what I mean? Like take the deceased person, take the person who died and wrote this, take his thing and pretend that people who are currently alive wrote it.
Right.
Is that asking too much?
Yeah.
Apparently it is. Yeah. So this is yeah. How old were you when he was doing when he was being attention getting?
Yeah, I remember. When Dan was talking about his part, I was getting flashbacks.
Yeah.
So it would have been 71. So I'm born in 62, so I must have been 9.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I remember coming home, and my mom was there at the door, and she said, you can't come in the front door. You have to come in the back door. And I'm like, well, why can't I come in the front door? It's like, no, the front door's broken. So we can only come in the back door. And so we blockaded the front door because we didn't know if we were going to get stormed by whoever, I don't know, the FBI or whoever was looking for Dan Ellsberg in the papers. So we had blockaded the front. They had blockaded the front door, and I come in and I see all the people from the office there, and I'm like, what's going on? And people were everywhere. The papers were getting sorted, and people had pillows there weren't enough chairs. People were sitting on the floor going through the papers, and it was, I look back now and I think how beautiful that everybody was there working together. And then I just remember my mom saying, maybe you could just sit in the corner in your room for a little bit. I can't remember. I think my brother and I shared a room at that point. Just stay out of the way. And if anybody, you can't have any friends over, no friends coming over. And if anybody asks, the front door is broken.
Wow.
So, yeah. I also remember another story coming home after that. And my mom was a little upset and agitated because the screens on our windows, we had a ground level, just a 1 level small home. The screens on our window in Maryland were not on the windows. They were kind of hastily thrown aside. And she's like, what's going on? And we got in the house, and she immediately called the office, and she said, I think somebody's been in here to bug the house, because we came back, unexpectedly, and the screens are not on the windows like they should be. So weird,
Wow.
I hope the New York Times eventually gets it right.
I wouldn't hold my breath.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we can get Jamie Keelis on it and get that corrected.
John Cusack retweeted my tweet where it said, "Dear New York Times, thanks for all the effort you guys put into writing this Mike Gravel obit. Its author would be proud if he were still alive." So you got a John Cusack retweet, yeah.